Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving deep into the sands of Abydos to uncover a highly sophisticated society that existed way before the famous pharaohs. We're tracking down a monumental discovery that didn't just tweak the Egyptian timeline, it literally rewrote the history of human language itself. So who actually ruled Egypt before the pharaohs? Most of us, we grew up learning about King Tut or Ramses. But what about the rulers who came before the first dynasty? Today, we're exploring a totally forgotten era, Dynasty Zero, by checking out one of the most unprecedented archaeological finds in history, Tomb Uj.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the true Scorpion King.
Now, when you hear Scorpion King, your mind probably jumps straight to the famous Hieronymus mace head, or, let's be honest, maybe a certain Hollywood movie. But the King Scorpion we're talking about today, King Scorpion I, is a much older ruler. He was an incredibly powerful figure, dominating the region long before that famous mace head was even carved.
If we trace this on the timeline, Scorpion I's reign dates all the way back to around 3150 BC. That is roughly a century and a half before Egypt was even unified. He was at the head of the Nakoda Empire, which culturally dominated Egypt, but hadn't quite nailed down total political unity just yet. And honestly, it's wild to think it took until 1988 to finally unearth his secrets.
Moving on to Section 2, let's explore his tomb, basically a palace for the afterlife. The big breakthrough happened right at the southern edge of Cemetery U. In 1988, a team from the German Archaeological Institute, led by Günther Dreyer, stumbled on a discovery that completely stunned the archaeological community. See, up until this point, graves in the sequence were just simple pits, but Tomb Uj, it was completely unmatched by anything before or after it. The scale of this thing was just staggering. 55 square meters. To put that into perspective, this was a massive brick-lined complex. In the entire sequence of monuments in Cemetery U, absolutely nothing compares to it until the reign of Horaha, much later. The sheer size alone screams that this was a ruler of unprecedented authority. Because it wasn't just a grave, you see, it was actually a simplified model of a royal palace, custom-built for the afterlife. Walking through the layout, the architectural genius is pretty obvious. You've got this massive central burial chamber sunk a full 1.5 meters deep. Branching off from that are 9 connecting magazine rooms, all linked by these narrow slits. And those slits, they were actually designed to simulate doors for the deceased king to pass through. Later on, 2 more rectangular storage rooms were added, bringing the whole shebang to a 12-chamber complex. The entire idea was that the dead king should live in his final resting place exactly as he did in his earthly residence. And right inside that central chamber, they found something amazing, the heqa-scepter. It's a spectacular 33.5-centimeter staff carved completely out of ivory. Now, if you know anything about later Egyptian pharaohs, you'll definitely recognize this hook shape. It became the standard, iconic symbol of royal power. Finding this in Tomb Uj is absolute, undeniable proof that a ruler of massive importance was laid to rest here.
This brings us to Section 3. The ancient wine trade.
The numbers we're looking at here are absolutely mind-blowing. Stacked 3 rows high inside the storage chambers, archaeologists found roughly 700 imported Canaanite wine jars. That adds up to an estimated 4,500 liters of sweet, resinated wine sourced all the way from the Palestinian area. Seeing this kind of immense wealth visualized just proves that King Scorpion I controlled a massive, well-oiled trade network, flowing straight through Lower Egypt and right into his hands. But here is what's truly fascinating. Researchers noted that these vessels were produced exclusively for the export of wine to Egypt. Just think about the level of sophistication required for that. This wasn't some casual trading. It was a highly established, specialized export market created specifically to supply the early Egyptian elite. And amazingly, Egyptians wouldn't even start cultivating their own wine until about 300 years after this king died. Okay, let's get into the real game changer. Section 4, rewriting the history of writing. For the longest time, the old academic assumption was that Egyptian writing developed right alongside the unification of the state, much later on. But Tomb Uj totally shattered that belief. Researchers found fully developed, phonetically readable writing dating all the way back to 3320 BC. That means a complex writing system existed in Egypt over 100 years earlier than anyone previously thought. And the evidence for this? It came in a surprisingly tiny package. Archaeologists recovered over 160 incredibly small bone and ivory tags. We're talking tiny. None of them are larger than 2 to 3 centimeters.
Each one is pierced at the corner, and these weren't just primitive little sketches. They were fully mature hieroglyphs, with numbers originally tied to cedar boxes, holding fabrics, oils, and other luxury goods. You can basically think of them as ancient barcodes, meticulously tracking the quantity and the origins of the king's wealth. Let's play detective for a second and decode a few of these labels, because this is where it really gets fun. The early scribes actually used a formula. A large sign of a tree or plant combined with an animal represented an economic estate. The tree meant plantation, and the animal was the founding king. So a tree plus a scorpion meant goods came from the plantation of King Scorpion. Another super interesting one, a scorpion over a subdivided rectangle, which represented irrigated land, translated to the residence of King Scorpion. These tiny little labels give us a literal window into a highly organized, booming state's economy.
Which leads us perfectly into our final segment, Section 5, the Forgotten Animal Dynasty. So those shipping tags didn't just track goods, they actually revealed a whole lineage of kings who founded their own plantations and estates. Gunther Dreyer eventually managed to assign 15 kings to this Forgotten Dynasty 0. And the names in this lineage? They are absolutely fascinating. Alongside King Scorpion, we have King Snail, King Dog, King Lion, King Fish, King Stork, and King Elephant. It's an entire animal dynasty of rulers who were just completely forgotten by history, or at best vaguely remembered by later Egyptians as distant demigods.
But make no mistake, these guys weren't just local chieftains. These animal kings, culminating in rulers like Scorpion I, wielded serious power. They ruled the entire northern Nile Valley. And we know this for sure because place names from the Delta show up on those tiny tags, which tells us Scorpion was actively collecting tribute and taxes from the far north. He was effectively subjugating the region, despite the ongoing resistance of local Delta elites. They literally laid the groundwork for the unified Egypt that would rise to power shortly after.
Tomb Uj was just one single excavation, yet it completely overturned our understanding of writing, trade, and statehood, revealing an entire lost dynasty in the process. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other powerful ancient rulers and what other civilization-altering secrets are waiting silently right now beneath the sands of Abydos? Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this incredible slice of history. I can't wait to guide you through our next explainer.